everybody. I'm Katie.
I'm Becky, and this is Live, Laugh, Lorcana. I have an important question for you.
Go with your question.
Did you listen to the Illuminateers yet?
No.
I just need you to,
Why?
because I'm giving you a hint. The hint is on the Illuminateers stream, and you need to watch it so we can talk about it.
What deck you're playing? Is that the hint? Okay, let's just explain in case I keep this in. All right. Becky will not tell me what deck she's playing for the set championship. Okay. She is refusing to tell me, which makes me crazy because I can't handle not knowing things.
Yeah, I haven't told Katie because it is a big secret. I'm working very hard and doing so much work, like the kind of work I was putting in for the Glamour Gauntlet, except even more. And Katie's just gonna be so impressed with me and love me so much.
Is that why you won't tell me? Because you're supposed to you're trying to surprise me with how good it is?
No, I'm going to surprise you with how good I am.
Oh. Why won't you tell me what deck it is?
Well, I thought it would be fun for you to be surprised.
You've never met me.
Okay, I'll just tell you because this is stupid. I took your advice, Katie. Do you remember what you recommended me last episode?
Steel Amethyst.
The Bivens list.
Mm-hmm.
I've been training the Bivens list, Katie.
Wow.
On the Illuminateers last night, they talked about the Bivens list. The consensus between Liam, Hal, and Nive is that absolutely no one should play that list if they are not Zach Bivens.
I've heard that take before.
Zach Bivens and me.
Well, everyone always compares you to Zach Bivens, so it's
Oh, that
perfect.
is so true. Honestly. Every day I'm compared to him. Can't mention him without also mentioning me.
So, how do you feel about that?
Okay, well, see, they said that you can't play it because nobody has the big brain of Zach Bivens. But during my ADHD testing, they also tested my IQ, and I don't know, I'm pretty big brain. I feel like I got this.
I have complete faith in you. Do you like the list? Because you tried other things, right? But you stuck with this.
Yeah, I really like it.
There you go.
Okay, I'm Bivensing it because that's a verb and an adjective now. So now that you know, we got to train together.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna grab deck lists of all the best decks.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna verse each other. Like you play on your deck, I play the various meta decks, but it probably won't work because of how I'm not very good at the other decks. I might be. We'll find out. But we're gonna do a training regimen. I hope you're not busy the rest of the week.
I love that for us.
Yeah, man.
So that's exciting. Set championships. Actually, when this episode comes out, set championships will be happening. So we'll be very busy. So we have something a little different planned for this episode. We actually have a guest coming who plays a different game to kind of get that perspective and talk about women and other marginalized genders in TCGs. So we're super excited for that interview.
Today we are joined with a very special guest, Elaine from the Pitch Perfect podcast. Here is the interview with Elaine.
You have to do your song sound effect.
Oh my gosh, hold on. This is the interview with Elaine.
So I usually make Becky do the intro on the podcast, but I actually know our guest today, so I'm going to do the intro. So today we are joined by Elaine. Elaine is someone I was lucky enough to meet at a Flesh and Blood event back when I used to play. She is one of the hosts of the Pitch Perfect podcast. She is one of the founding members of the Rainbow Pitch League, and she is an all-around awesome community member and cosplayer for the Flesh and Blood TCG. Welcome, Elaine.
Hi. Thank you. That is very high praise. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. We're so glad to get to talk to you.
Usually, as our first question, we always ask about your TCG background. What games do you play?
So my TCG background is not that extensive beyond Flesh and Blood. I started playing Flesh and Blood 2 years ago after the release of Everfest. I had been introduced to the game actually quite some time before that, and I did not enjoy it at all. And between that time, I kind of just played Magic very casually. I would have never called myself a Magic player, and I still would never identify as a Magic player. But I played Magic like casually in the sense of like tabletop games and stuff like that. And as I almost got more into Magic, I rediscovered Flesh and Blood and went full in Flesh and Blood, really fell in love with it. And since then, I've explored other games. I've played Lorcana before. I've had fun playing Lorcana before. I really like the Star Wars Unlimited TCG that came out. I've played like Alpha Clash and with Soul Forge, and yeah, pretty much my other experience with TCGs are kind of I'm at a tournament for a weekend and my TCG friends are like, "Oh, have you played this game?" And we sit down and play it. They teach me how to play. We'll play a few games. Sometimes I'll go buy the product if I really like it. Sometimes it's just one of those things that when I see them again, I'm like, "Hey, let's play that game. I liked it." But it's mainly just Flesh and Blood.
Nice.
Yeah, we're like one TCG girls around here mostly. It's like hard to balance like all the different cards and games.
Yeah, I hyperfixate a lot too, obviously, right? So, when I found Flesh and Blood, it was like, I'm full in, and this is my TCG. It's the only TCG I really identify with is Flesh and Blood. I play other TCGs just for like the enjoyment and like having fun and camaraderie with friends factor, not really the gameplay factor, how I engage with Flesh and Blood.
And especially because you're also producing content, so it makes it a lot harder to like keep a lot of balls in the air.
Right. Balancing like actually playing the game with creating content can be hard enough as it is. So I don't think I could handle more than one TCG on.
Sorry.
Speaking of creating content, yeah, you are one of the hosts of a podcast called Pitch Perfect, which is a really great podcast and actually unknowingly to you probably has inspired a lot from our podcast. We've been stealing your ideas for a long time. Can you tell us a little about that podcast and how it came about?
Yeah, of course. First of all, you're welcome to continue stealing ideas. I take no offense to that. Is a form of flattery to me. So thank you. But the Pitch Perfect podcast, it's a podcast that I run with myself, obviously, and my counterpart Melody in the Flesh and Blood community. It's by women, mainly for women. However, we just encourage everyone to listen because we think that there's a lot that can be learned from hearing two women sit down and talk about their experience in TCGs. Because as I know and you guys know and pretty much everyone knows, TCGs are a male-dominated space. It's a male-dominated hobby, and there's nothing wrong with that. But because of that, a lot of males just they aren't familiar with what it is like to be a gender minority in the space. And so they can sit down, still listen to our content, and we try and talk about relevant topics and experiences and bring to voices other women and gender minorities, marginalized genders in the game. Also, just when I talk about marginalized genders throughout this podcast, this interview, I just want to make it clear that I'm using the term to refer to anyone in the community who feels marginalized due to their gender. So that includes cis women, but also transgender women and transgender men and non-binary people and other pronouns that fall under this umbrella of marginalized genders. So that podcast got started because I started playing Flesh and Blood. I didn't really have any other women on my local scene, and I got on Flesh and Blood Twitter and found Melody, and it was like, oh, I'm so excited to have another like woman friend who plays Flesh and Blood. And so we got on a Discord call and we started playing Flesh and Blood games together, and that was our first time like really meeting outside of the context of just Twitter. And we started talking about our shared experiences as women in the TCG space, and we're like, we should just talk about this on a podcast, right? In a way that people can hear about the woman experience in TCG spaces. So that's how that's how that got started. And I love it. And I think hopefully it's been impactful to the community and will continue to be. But yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely loved listening to that podcast when I was playing Flesh and Blood. It was like, so especially because my local scene for Flesh and Blood was super, super male dominated. I was often the only woman in the room. So it was like always nice to listen to you guys and like, no, I'm not like alone in the space among everything else.
Yeah. And that's kind of something I hope that our listeners, I mean, Lorcana has been generally not so male dominated, but it's always nice to be able to listen to people talk who have had a different experience.
Yeah, I think that for Lurkana, like hope I'm not a Lurkana player, but I would assume that the Disney IP kind of helps a little bit with the gender ratio. Is that yeah.
Yeah, it seems to.
In response to that, I'll say I was listening to your podcast actually the other day. I listened to the episode where you interviewed the VML, the women from the VML League, which is like that league in Magic. And they were saying, like, if you look across all Magic players, that it's actually about a third women. But if you go to like a Grand Prix, it's maybe 5% women. And I actually think Lorcana falls kind of similar to that, where if you look at everybody, it's like a third. But if you look at competitive, it's like white males, like every top 8 photo, like white males.
Right. And that's not to say that women or people of marginalized genders are not excelling at these games in the same way that cisgendered male men are. But it's just to say that like it's a lot more intimidating for us to walk into these spaces, right? And turn up at these events when you know that you might be the only person in the room, where you might feel marginalized in the room because of your gender, or you might have a bad experience because of your gender, where you're just you love the game, but it's a little discouraging to go compete in it because of your gender. And like a lot of that just comes with confidence, but a large portion of it is also just educating that cis male community to be more aware of the presence of marginalized genders, and just more like thoughtful about the kind of experience you're providing to them. And it's not like good enough to not be making an effort to make sure that people of marginalized genders feel welcome in the shared space. It's like it's an active effort, and it comes with education, and they have to be aware of it. So it's important that we talk about it, right?
For sure.
So that kind of leads into like a really awesome thing you did to kind of mitigate this. So you actually, in collaboration with Kiki from the Rainbow Foils Discord, announced the creation of a Flesh and Blood League last year. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So as Melody and I started our podcast and started talking about our experiences, we had some guests say like, hey, you guys remind me of VML from Magic. So we looked into them. We thought that was cool, but it was kind of like not like we were like, oh, that's really cool. Like maybe that's something that we could do. And then Kiki from the Rainbow Foils Discord, we got talking with them just about, so I guess to say Rainbow Foils Discord is a Discord that Kiki runs for the LGBTQIA plus community in Flesh and Blood, which Melody and myself are not a part of because we're both cisgendered straight females. So we're not in that Discord, and Kiki has their own little community, right? And we decided to combine our communities to bring a league for all people of marginalized genders, because as we got talking, we started to experience or realize that the marginalization that we were feeling as cisgender women was not just something that cisgender women felt, right? It was something that all people of marginalized genders felt. And so we expanded our experience that we were talking on, because it was the only experience we could talk on as our lived experience, to start thinking about the larger community and widen that umbrella and make a league with a space. And we just try and instill confidence in people of marginalized genders to go out and play, to let them know that they are celebrated within this community. And it's been a really great thing that it's a labor of love from all three of us for sure. And I could not be doing it with better people. I'm just so thankful that I have Kiki and Melody to work on this with me. But it's just been a great community that we've formed, right? That's our 3 C's: confidence, community, and celebration. Those are our pillars, as we call them, for the league. And yeah, I think it's been a massive success, and the feedback that we've gotten has just been better than I could have hoped for.
That's awesome. So for people who aren't familiar, the league structure. So this happens mainly online, is that right?
Right. It's a worldwide league. So anyone from all around the world can play it. Last year, we capped it at 64 players, and we didn't think that we would reach that cap. We ended up reaching that cap like the first day that registration opened, over a 2-week registration period. So this year, the league hasn't launched yet. It's kicking off in June. We always kick it off for Pride Month. And we're expanding the league to 128 players, so doubling the size. So it'll be 9 weeks long. So each week, every Sunday morning, your pairings are posted, and you have until Saturday the next day to organize that game and play it with your opponent and report back the results to us. And then the way that players play it, we don't really control that. We do ask that they play on webcam, because we like to produce these matches for the community to see. We have a lot of support from the community, and they like to follow along with the league as it goes on. So we ask that they play on webcam over Discord, and so that we can record and produce the games if we want.
Nice. And you said it's like is it 9 weeks of like Swiss rounds and then you cut to top 8? Is that how it works?
Yeah, it's 9 weeks of Swiss rounds and cut to top 8. And top 8 is 1 to 2 weeks, depending on player schedule.
Nice. And I'm so glad to hear that it went from 64 to 128, because actually the first league started when I was still playing Flesh and Blood. And I was trying to decide if I wanted to sign up, because I'm like a really nervous webcam player. And like in the days I was trying to decide if I should sign up, it filled up. It was super popular.
Yeah, it filled up so fast. I remember when it filled up, it hit cap, and like we were texting in the group chat, and we were like, oh my gosh, we just hit cap. And then none of us had even, like, the possibility of it hitting cap was so far a thought from our mind that we hadn't even figured out yet how to close registration. And so it hit cap, and we were all on our computers like, how do we shut this down? Like, abort. We don't want to kick people out of it after registration. So it was like, yeah, it was a big success, but very surprising, and took a lot of of panic in the time. But I'm sorry to hear that you missed out on it, though.
Yeah, that's okay. Maybe I should play this year. I'll get a Flesh and Blood deck back out.
Yeah, 1 game of Flesh and Blood a week. That could be fun, and especially in a community setting like this. It's guaranteed to be a good time, but it's up to you, obviously.
The other thing you do that's really cool is I watched a bunch of the videos you guys produced for the league last season, and like most of the casting is done by women and gender minorities. So like I know like Kiki was like you were casting some, Mara was on there, like Yuki Lee Bender was on there. Like it was so cool, because so much of the casting in Flesh and Blood has usually been males. Like it was awesome hearing you guys on there.
Yeah, we definitely like want to diversify the casting base. We don't always guarantee that the casting will be done by people of marginalized genders, but it's an interesting thing, right? Because if there are people of marginalized genders, we obviously want to bring them on and spotlight them when we can. I think there's also an aspect where, like, we're not opposed to having people of non-marginalized genders on as casters, because we want to make our players feel supported by the greater community of Flesh and Blood. And so that's part of it, right? Having like our sponsors and supporters also be shown and be like, hey, like we are celebrated from every corner of Flesh and Blood, not just our little community so it's a fun balance, but we are always happy to showcase and spotlight these diverse creators when we can.
Nice. We already touched on it, but do you have anything to add about why you felt this league was maybe needed for Flesh and Blood?
Yeah, I think we just like I said, we just realized that a lot of our experiences, like they were bigger than just us. So we wanted to offer resources to anyone in the Flesh and Blood community who might be feeling this way, who might just want to ease into the game or meet people like themselves or be in a safe space if they don't feel like going to or they're intimidated to go to a big event or there's so many different situations and barriers that might be preventing people of marginalized genders from engaging with the competitive scene of Flesh and Blood. And so we just wanted to watch our players grow, whether that was improving their confidence in gameplay or just improving their confidence in the sense that they feel like I belong in this community, I belong in this game.
That's awesome. I love this. Are we going to talk about when we're going to make a Lorcana League, Katie? Are we?
I like talked about this like to Becky a few times. I like sending her your website and being like, "Oh, I would love to do this." I feel like it's so much work, and I don't have the skill set to do it. Because it's a lot of work, right?
Yeah, it's a ton of work. I will say it's a ton of work. And Kiki, Melody, and myself, we took it on, the three of us, and everything that has been done for the league that was produced and made by the three of us. All the pairings, like all the communications, the socials. Like we don't have like interns or whatever or volunteers doing
Right.
anything for us. It's the three of us, and it's a ton of work, but it's also the most rewarding work I've ever done in my life. Like it's a labor of love for all three of us. It's something that I am super proud of. And if you guys do ever want to start a Larcana League, like we're very happy to share everything that we've learned and just also what it takes logistically to do this. And on the back end, there's a lot that people don't see. And just like, we have documents after documents after documents of list of things to get done, of things that we've learned, of, checklists of, and just the logistics behind it and everything. So I'd be happy to have that conversation with you if it is something that you decide to do.
That's incredible. I'm sure it is so much work. I can't believe you guys are just doing it, the three of you. That's insane. It has to be a labor of love, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we don't charge for registration. It's completely free to enter. All of the prizes that we give out are donated prizes. We have a lot of very generous supporters and sponsors that donated great prizes for us. So we also have judge staff that we have volunteered, but and we sent them like little judge staff care packages after the conclusion of the league. Like we had so much prizes that we had to ship out. All that to say that there's no what is the word, money. Like I'm not making a single penny off of doing this, and neither is Kiki and neither is Melody. It is 100% just a labor of love. Yeah.
That's amazing. Amazing. I'm so floored by it. You're incredible.
Oh no. Thank you.
Whew. You are
Fantastic.
And while we're on the topic of sponsors, we should brag about the fact that Legend Story Studios does sponsor you guys, right? Like the creators of Flesh and Blood, like they're one of your sponsors.
Yes, they are. They are one of our sponsors. They were gracious enough to promote us on all of their socials. They wrote an article about the league and reposted our registrations and our websites and everything. They donated prize support to us, and that speaks volume to LSS as a company. Yeah, I cannot express gratitude enough for that.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. So we talked about how much work this is. Let's talk about why it's worth it. I think we already touched on it, but this seems like a really great thing for like, especially like I'm thinking of even you, Becky, because like the competitive scene is so intimidating for like so many reasons. But like having one less reason where you're not like different from anybody else in the league, like I feel like it would help a lot.
100%. Yeah, I'm still like not there in terms of feeling comfortable in the space. I mean, league is fine, but like tournaments and stuff, I'm very, very easily intimidated, and it really, really, really affects my play like very badly. So I think this is beautiful and wonderful. And now I'm like, should I switch to Flesh and Blood? I'm kidding. Whoever's listening, I'm joking, but like, what a great community.
Yeah, I will say that I think one of the most amazing things to witness, and of course it was like a mission, it was part of the reason why we started the league, but actually like seeing change happen and people reaching out and telling us how the league impacted their flesh and blood journey as a player was just so incredible. And I have a lot of stories like that. And I just in a broader sense though, this league connected community members from around the world. So there's like a large aspect where we have people who are like in the league, like in the Discord, hey, I'm thinking about trying to go to this big event. Is anyone else in the league also thinking about going to that big event? And then you have people being like, yeah, I'm going to be there. They're like, if you're going, I'm going to go. You've connected this worldwide community where it's not so intimidating to go to an event because you have friends, people, like there are faces that you're going to recognize, names that you're going to recognize, people that you can go and talk to who are, if I have a bad experience at an event because of my gender, like someone who can show compassion towards me in my experience in a way that my other friends who are cisgendered males might not be able to give me compassion in that scenario, and it's like there's just this safety net that the league as a whole has created in this community that's been like really just touching to see. And I think that's a big part of like what helps drive the player confidence. I know that a lot of feedback that we have a lot of, I guess I won't name names because as for kind of, you won't know who I'm talking about, but we have like there were a few high profile players in Flesh and Blood prior to the league who are women or people of marginalized gender who played in the league, and like mixing these people who are seen as like pro players in Flesh and Blood and saying like, oh, this person who has maybe never played in a competitive event in their life, like you guys are paired together this first round, congrats. And it's like we got a lot of feedback just being like, I was surprised by how confident that I felt playing and being a part of a community as these high profile players, right? These like big players, like realizing that I am a part of the same community that they're a part of, and that I can sit down and play a game and play in the same league that they play in. They were just like, that was really impactful to my confidence. We got feedback like that. That was really great to see. We have people that played the league as a form to experience Flesh and Blood and ease into the game. And they've told us like, I probably would have never played it in the extent that I play it to right now without the league. And I met people that I hadn't met before. And now when I'm watching Pro Tour, it's like, oh, I see them like they're top 30 at the like Mercy just top 32 the Pro Tour. And like I had never met her prior to our league, and she won the whole league. And there's been multiple names throughout where it's like, oh, that person who played in our league is in the finals of a Battle Hardened. Like that person just top aided a calling that played in our league. Like it's been so cool to actually see these players grow and just connect them with other players and meet them. And I truly cannot take credit for all of that. This is just something that we put on with the hopes of providing a safe community that would foster this. But I can't stress enough like that without our players and without their attitudes and just their like camaraderie and willingness to engage and play in the league, like none of these experiences would exist, right? Like I'm just someone who makes it happen, but they are at the heart of it all.
That's awesome. I love that. And I feel like it helps so much because You tell me if you agree with this or not, but I feel like there are probably people out there who might have never played in a competitive event if they didn't have that league as a stepping stone. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, definitely. That's something that is definitely feedback that we've gotten from people, like, hey, because of the environment of this league and the way it's structured and just the way it's presented, like I was able to test out like what it feels like to play in a competitive setting, because the league, although it's not like competitive in the sense that a pro tour or anything is competitive, you're still playing for a top 8 spot for prizes. It comes with, I don't know what it comes with, maybe bragging rights, but not really, because it doesn't even have like that.
Well, see, I do know the Flesh and Blood players, and I do know some of the names in your league, so it's a huge deal to win that league.
I mean, like, I would claim bragging rights if I were to play in the league and win it, but I mean, for some people, it's more of just like a fun thing to do, right? It's supposed to feel low stakes. We gave out prizes to top 8, obviously, but we also gave out spot prizes. We gave out 4 spot prizes a week. We wanted it to serve for whatever people were looking for, right? If you're looking for it to be more competitive, treat it competitive, sure. Like if you're looking to just play Flesh and Blood more, treat it that way. If you're looking to just meet more people in a community like you, treat it that way. You know, we wanted it to be something that everyone could get what they wanted out of it. So to alleviate the sense that it was a super competitive league, we gave away 4 spot prizes a week just to be like, hey, you could win something without having to feel the pressure of making top 8, you know?
Love that. Another thing I think is really cool is how flexible it is. Because I'm thinking of like also like busy mom, for instance. Like this is really easy for her to be like, okay, I can go to one game a week online. Like I think that's a really cool opportunity too.
That's something I always tell people who are thinking about playing in the league, and they're like, I don't know if I have 8 weeks to dedicate to Flesh and Blood. I'm like, well, you're not dedicating 8 weeks of your life, right? You're dedicating an hour a day in your own home to sitting down and engaging with this community and enjoying the game, right? At a very low stakes. And you might even win something and make some friends in the meantime, right?
Awesome. So I hate this question a little bit, but I'm going to ask it anyway. But an online response I have seen to your league and leagues like it is that they're actually putting up gender barriers in TCGs. And there's actually a lot of anger from some cishet white men that are being like barred from these tournaments. They don't like that they exist. What would you say in response to those kind of criticisms?
Yeah, this is a something that we have to address, and a response that we get, and it kind of goes back to right experience. It's hard. It's sometimes hard to argue with these people, or I should say rationalize, because they don't have the same lived experience as we do. They don't understand that they can go into any LGS and be recognized as a player, right? Be recognized as like, that is our clientele, a cisgendered male. Like I've had experience. I actually just had an experience recently. Back in December, I went into a game store. It's not one of my local game stores or anything like that. But it was just, I ran into a game store. I just needed to pick up a few things. So I ran in, went straight to what I needed, picked up the products that I needed, and then went to check out. And when I was checking out, the cashier said something to me of the effects, I'm paraphrasing because this was months ago, something to me of the effect of like, they made a product recommendation for me to add on to my purchase, but followed it up with, oh, but I don't know if you know if that's something that your boyfriend would like. Right. And so I was like, wait, excuse me? And they were like, oh, they were like, well, you're buying for all this too. Like your boyfriend might also enjoy this. And I was like, I'm good. And I just paid for my purchase and left. However, innocent exchange to say, right? Like they are doing their job, they're recommending product. It is near Christmas time. They're probably thinking like, oh, this girl came in here to buy something for her boyfriend, even though I came in completely alone, knew exactly what I wanted. It's just really demonstrates the fact that when I walk into an LGS, I am not always identified as clientele in that game store, right? They don't see me as a player always. They don't always see me as a customer, as someone who's supposed to be there. And that can be very marginalizing and just very like, it makes you feel alone. And moments like that sometimes make me feel like no matter how much work I put into this space, this will always be a battle that I fight, and something that I have to deal with. And cisgendered men don't understand that feeling. They don't understand these barriers. They just don't have to face them in the way that we do. They don't know what it's like to walk into an LGS and not be identified as a customer, as a player, to walk into an LGS and not see people that they identify with, that they have shared experiences with, based on their gender. So it's not really their place to criticize or their place to decide when these spaces are needed. Is there a space to like listen and learn and support and offer resources in any way that I might ask for resources? But it's not their place to decide if it's needed. And I also find this argument a little bit ironic when cisgendered men say, oh, I don't like that you're doing this and excluding me for it. I often look at them and say, I just want to be clear that the basis of your argument is that representation matters, right? So that doesn't.
I love that.
Yes, very well said.
And now we will do some listener questions for Elaine. Martin Karp asks, what can non-marginalized groups do to make ladies feel more comfortable in TCG spaces?
Yeah, I think that I've talked a lot about just kind of like offering support when needed. I think a lot of it, like if I walk into an LGS, I just don't want people to look at me differently or treat me differently. I think just being aware, people who might not be a cisgendered male in your shared space might feel this way. I think that awareness is like key to it if you are a cisgendered male, right? Because when I first started playing the game, I was on a team I was the only only woman on the team, and every other member on the team was this cisgendered male, right? And we would travel to tournaments together. And one thing that we noticed was I always got the comment of like, where my teammates were getting asked, when did you start playing this game? I was getting asked, like, why did you start playing this game? What brought you into this game? And even that slight difference of language, I think is something that you can be aware of to not make people feel marginalized, right? Because if I'm in a group of four cisgender males and I'm the only like cisgender female in it, and they say, oh, when did you start playing the game? When did you start playing the game? When did you start playing the game? Why did you start playing the game? It feels like, why are you here? Like, you don't belong here. Like, what? I don't ever think the comment is made with ill intent, but I think that like just start the conversation the same way you would anyone, right? Just like, hey, when did you start playing the game? And then you can get into it. Like, why did you get into it? But I also got a lot of comments just, I don't know, around like my deck. I would get a lot of weird comments that, again, I don't think were ever said in ill intent, but that were just kind of around like, oh, is that your deck or did you borrow it from your boyfriend? That one's a little bit more crazy to say to someone, but just like the language that you're using when you're talking to people of marginalized genders, just being conscious that even if you're not saying something with ill intent, the way that you say it can be marginalizing. It might sound like a nitpicky point to drive home, but I think it's something that people aren't aware of that can come across in a weird way.
That's perfect answer. And it sounds like a small thing, but it's just like this death by a thousand cuts of like, just you're bombarded by these very small signs that you don't belong really add up.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I don't think that anyone ever did it to be mean or to make me feel marginalized, but just it's like it does. And so it's an important thing to be aware of the language that you're using when you talk to players, right?
For sure. Rebecca at the Illuminary asks, what could the Lorcana community learn, both good and bad, from the Fab community with regards to empowering women and gender minorities in this space?
Ooh, okay. What could the Lorcana community learn? Well, I think that you guys are already doing a really great job of empowering women and gender minorities in this space just by what y'all are doing. I messaged Katie and I was after y'all invited me on the podcast and I checked out your page and I was like, hey, I want to steal the idea of that document that you have that's just highlighting people of diverse genders and women in create content creation and just in the space in general. I think that is a really great thing that y'all are doing. I think that the Fab community is really good at not shying away from these conversations. I think that we are very upfront about them, and there's been like a mini debates on Twitter, which of course debates on Twitter are not always constructive, but many debates on Twitter where someone will say something just not cool at all to a person of marginalized genders, and then you have this whole army coming after them, right? And so we've kind of like band together as a community and said like, hey, this behavior is not accepted here. And ultimately we love our game, as I'm sure that Lorcana players love their game. You want this community to continue to grow, but it's really important to, as a community, set a standard from the beginning before it grows to like 1 million people. You want to say, hey, like we want this to grow to 1 million people, but this behavior won't be tolerated.
I can definitely see that. I talk a lot. I'm a huge fan of like allyship. Like we all need to be on the same page here, and like this can't be okay in the community. Rebecca at the Illuminary also asks, since Lorcana is so new, what would you say is the most important thing the community could do as a whole to create a welcoming environment for gender minorities right from the get-go?
Yeah, I feel like I just accidentally answered
Yeah.
that with with the last question. Like I said, just once again reiterating how important it is to take these initiatives from the get-go. It's important to talk about and not shy away from difficult topics. No one wants to like say like, hey, someone pointed out these things about me that made me feel insecure. No one wants to talk about their insecurities in that way. But I mean, the fact that we had a guest come on and do that and say, I just went to an event and I had a really bad experience and it ruined my weekend and it made me feel insecure. And like, these are the ways these comments and behaviors impacted me. That is something I have so much respect for that person coming on and being able to like talk about that. Not shying away from the difficult conversations, I think just helps people realize like, oh, this is a real thing that happened and there's real changes to be made and real behaviors that are happening that are not acceptable. And I can be aware that they're happening now, even if I'm not participating in them. I can stand up for it when I hear it or be like more, my ears are more perked up to it now, at an event. Like I might be listening for it, more aware. It's like, I feel like I've said it 1 million times, but I think awareness is just a really important part of everything that we do.
For sure. Rav Garrett asks, what is a positive experience you had in TCGs that celebrated diversity without requiring your leadership? How did you feel welcomed or celebrated?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. There are a few things that come to mind. I think that like LSS just doing things like making Women's Day was not too long ago, and like they put out a post for Women's Day, and like that was, I think, really cool and welcoming to see. That was like, oh, they're aware of it. And I think Lorcana is Disney based, right? But LSS in Flesh and Blood, all of our heroes they're creating their own world, right? It's not under an already existing IP. And so to see that we have just as much diversity amongst the heroes in our game that are created by LSS is like really reassuring. It makes me feel celebrated and welcomed in the space. As far as like a specific example, this is like a really small thing that happened. And it might even sound like a strange answer, but I remember very early on in my career of being a Flesh and Blood player, I was at a tournament and I was playing an event, and my opponent was just once again, it's like I don't think it was done with ill intent. But my opponent was doing the thing where every time that they played a card, they would turn the card around to face me and then like read it to me and tell me what it did. And then with it, every time they did anything, they would just like explain what was happening in the game. And this was I'll say that this was at a pro quest. Right. So if you don't know, you play in a pro quest, and if you win the pro quest, you qualify for the pro tour. So I'm playing in a pro quest, and this person is playing against me as if this is my very first time playing the game. And this person is just like turning around the card and being like, this attacks for this, and if it hits, this happens because it says this right here is where it says, like, it was just like and I was getting annoyed by it, but I was just letting it happen. And I remember the guy sitting next to me, who was someone that I knew, he just turned and said, hey, she knows how to play the game. If she has any questions, she can ask. And then it kind of stopped. Like, the guy that I was playing against just played the game like a normal person after that. And it was like a very small gesture and a very small thing, and something that I could have done myself. I could have spoken up and said something myself, but just the fact that someone else in the space recognized what I was going through and felt compelled to like offer this olive branch and this as saying like, hey, I've got your back. I really appreciated that. And it's not to say that you can't speak up for yourself or anything like that, but it was a moment where I felt like I have people on my side.
Yeah, I love that, because it feels like so isolating sometimes. So even just the fact like seeing them, like them seeing it and being like, you know what, that's really not okay. Like, if it feels very supportive.
I like that. See, what I do in situations like that, like I tend to like, because I've experienced many things like that. And it's like, are they doing this because they always do that? Or are they doing that because I look the way I do? And I have a lot of trouble being like, I don't want to say anything. Because like, what if they're not? What if he just does this all the time? What if he always like, tells people this or whatever? And so it's hard for me. Because again, I don't have a ton of TCG experience. So sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I should say anything. But so it's great to have somebody that has your back. Naturally 94 asks, can you put into words the impact of feeling welcomed in a TCG space? What does that look like to you? I know as women, those positive moments are so valuable for me personally. Something so small like a smile or a hey, nice to see you can carry a huge amount of weight in terms of my validation, self-confidence, and sense of belonging. I really hope those in the majority who generally feel welcome in most spaces most of the time can appreciate the role they can play and the positive impact they can make.
Yeah. I think I've talked a lot about just like the importance of being welcome. I will say that another small thing, which goes back to just kind of being conscious of like the language that we use, is an example what made me feel welcome to Flesh and Blood in the first place. Like I said, I played Magic before I got into FAP. I was playing Magic very, very casually, and I got into both Magic and Flesh and Blood because I was dating a guy at the time who was a Magic player turned Flesh and Blood player. And he introduced me to both of the games. And that is important because when he took me to the Magic tournaments and when I went with him to LGSs, when he would play Magic, I noticed that people would say like, oh, is your girlfriend coming tonight? Versus when I started going to Flesh and Blood events, I never was referred to that way. It was, hey, I'm paired into Elaine next round. I'm not paired into so and so's girlfriend, or like, hey, is Elaine coming to play tonight? Not like, hey, will your girlfriend be there tonight? And even that really small change in the way that you speak, change in the language that you use felt so good. It felt like I had an identity in this space aside from the person I was dating, the person who brought me into the space. I had my own identity in this community, and that made me feel welcome. And it made me actually play the game and actually engage in tournaments and start exploring it more and grow into where I am in the community right now. So yeah, I think the feeling of being welcome is just feeling like you have your own identity in the space and that you are recognized and appreciated for the person that you are in the space and all of your lived experiences and everything like that. And yeah.
That's a very good explanation.
Well, I think it's interesting because my husband doesn't play Lorcana, nor does he come to League. And sometimes people ask me when they hear I have a husband, like, oh, like, do you play with your husband often? I just like, no, I do not. He does not know how to play this game. Like, and I don't think that's like necessarily a gendered question because I'll ask people that too. Like, if I'm playing a guy and he mentions his wife, I'm like, oh, does she play? Because I'm always trying to get the girlies on the squad.
Right,
You know
right.
what I mean? But I always kind of get like, no, I'm here by myself.
It's just me, right? Yeah.
Jedi Geek Girl asks, what is the biggest roadblock for queer representation in TCGs and how do we improve upon removing them?
So this question, I am not super confident, or I don't think I'm qualified to answer because I am not a queer person in the community and I don't want to speak on behalf of the queer community. But I will say, just from observed behaviors, like within the nature of my league, that we practice with the league, we practice privacy, right? We have a lot of players, but unless they give us their consent to use their names and images and all of that in our videos and our website and our tweets and our marketing and everything that the public sees, we don't, because we want it to be open to players who might not be out publicly. Like, we've had people in the league who they'll maybe play under an identity that they're not publicly sharing. And I think that is, I can't speak on that experience, obviously, what it is like to not be out publicly, but I am happy to be a part of a team that can provide a space for queer folks to be themselves and feel safe to do so, hopefully in ways that they might not in other facets of their life. So I think that's as best as I can answer that from my own lived experiences.
Yeah. I love hearing that though, that like people finding like a safe place where they feel like they can authentically be themselves, even if they're not fully ready to share that with the world yet. And I think that's really beautiful. It makes me happy.
Like I said, and I have said many times, it's definitely something I'm really proud to be a part of. Yeah.
For sure. Oh, Elaine, I love you. This was great. I feel like I learned a lot. You're such a wonderful, caring, compassionate, wonderful person, and you do amazing work. And I'm just so thankful that you came and shared everything with us. That was so wonderful.
I'm like very thankful to be here. I was so touched when Katie reached out and asked me to come on the podcast. And I love talking about the work that I do, and I just feel really gracious to be in the position to do the things that I do in the Flesh and Blood community, and to just be involved in all these various projects. And I just always try and give it back to the community in every way that I can, and stress enough that, like, even though I try to do my best, like, none of my efforts mean anything without the rest of the community behind my back and the players that play in the league. And without Kiki and Melody, I could never do anything that I do without them. They are incredible. But yeah, this was so fun. I'm like, can we do this every week?
Anytime. I'm chatting anytime. Honestly, we always want to talk about this. It's a big deal for us. So
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Elaine. You have been like an inspiration to me for a really long time, so it was great having you on. I know most of our community doesn't know Flesh and Blood, but some of them do. So, do you have anything you want to plug, Flesh and Blood or otherwise?
Yeah, you can go to my Twitter is mainly what I'm on. I'm always on Twitter. And that is just Hamontree. I always have to explain this because it's Hamontree, like 3 words. That is my last name. It sounds ridiculous, but it just, in high school, people called me like bacon on bush or pork on shrubbery. It's as simple as that.
Such a good way to remember your last name. That's awesome.
Yeah. And if you just go there, of course, like the podcast that I do is the Pitch Perfect podcast, not the singing a cappella group, but Pitch Perfect in the sense that Pitch is a mechanic in Flesh and Blood. And the league is the Rainbow X Pitch League, Pitch Perfect in collaboration with the Rainbow Foils. Also, if you just go to my Twitter, which I already plugged, I have links to all of that in my bio. So you can find everything that you would want to find out about me on my Twitter.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for being here. Can't thank you enough. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for having me on. This was great.
That was the interview with Elaine.
Oh, that was the catchiest one yet.
Thank you. She's a delight. I really like her.
Mm-hmm.
Love her mission. Love everything about her. Love, love, love.
Yes, yeah, I had been kind of low-key wanting to have her on for a very long time, and I wasn't sure how people would react to it because obviously that was one of our longest interviews, and we did not talk about Lorcana. So super interested in the feedback. Let us know what you thought.
I mean, I've never touched Flesh and Blood, but I thought Elaine had really great insights, and I really, really enjoyed talking to her.
Yeah, me too. And if you are looking for nonsense, we'll be back to our regularly scheduled nonsense next episode.
Just us, a couple of set champs. I already have some victory speeches prepared. My notes app.
Do you really?
Katie, yeah, I do. Just some inspirational quotes to those who wish to be like me and Zach Bivens.
Perfect. That's amazing.
And let's talk about our featured creator.
This is yet another creator originally submitted to us from Martin Carp. Our featured creator is the Uninkable podcast. This podcast features a father-daughter duo, Chris and Savvy. They are both big Disney fans. They go to a local Lorcana league and they're super excited about all things Lorcana from art to strategy. Their podcast is a ton of fun to listen to. And it's especially exciting for me because the daughter, Savvy, really knows her stuff. She is so knowledgeable about Lorcana and very competitive, and nothing makes me happier than seeing young girls really getting into this game. So I expect great things from her.
Be sure to check out the Uninkable podcast on Spotify and Instagram. So that's our show. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram, or on YouTube for this, but on YouTube, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to check out our Discord. It is cool. It is fun. It is the place to be.
And until next time, remember to live, laugh, and lore.